All right, let's get right into it. If you're studying law, you know that feeling. It can be completely overwhelming. Well, today we're going to fix that. We're going to build a complete, logical map of the South African legal system piece by piece. Seriously, think of this as your ultimate study guide. It's designed to bring order to the chaos and get you absolutely ready for any test or exam. Okay, let's do this. You know that feeling, right? You're staring at this giant, tangled web of rules, principles, and all these strange Latin phrases. It's just confusing. But what if you could zoom out and see it all clearly, laid out like a proper geographical map, with continents, countries, and even cities? Well, that is exactly what we're building today. A clear, simple guide to help you navigate the entire legal landscape. So here's our game plan. First, we'll cover why we even bother classifying the law. Then, we'll start drawing the main borders, the really big divides. After that, we'll explore the two massive worlds of public and private law. Then, take a super deep dive into the law that governs all your stuff, your assets. And finally, we'll fill in the gaps with some other really important legal fields. Okay, Section 1. Why we map the law. Before we start drawing anything, we need to understand the ground we're building on. We have to learn the basic language of the law first. It's all about laying that solid foundation. Now this, right here, is our compass. It's our true north for the entire map, and it is so important. No matter where we go, public law, private law, it doesn't matter. The Constitution is the supreme ultimate law. Every single rule we talk about today has to line up with it. This is probably the most crucial foundational point in all of South African law, so remember it. So let's learn the local language. First word, a right. Now, a right isn't just something you feel you deserve. It's a legally protected claim. You, the person, or what the law calls a legal subject, have a claim over a thing, the legal object. That could be your car, your phone, or your house. And the key part is, the law will back you up. And here's the other side of that coin. For every single right, there's a flip side, a duty. If I have a right to my salary, my boss has a duty to pay me. If you have a right to enjoy your property quietly, your neighbors have a duty not to have a massive party at 3 a.m. See? Rights and duties, they create this perfect balance in the legal system. So who exactly are these legal subjects that can have rights and duties? Well, the law recognizes two main types. First, you have natural persons. That's easy. It's you and me, actual human beings. But then you also have what are called juristic persons. These are legal creations, things like companies, universities, or even the state itself. They're not human, but the law treats them like a person that can own property, sue people, and be sued. Okay, foundation is laid, we know the basic language. Now it's time to actually start drawing the big borders on our map. These are the huge fundamental divisions that split the entire world of law into major territories. Our very first border separates the law outside our country from the law inside it. On one side, you have international law. This is all about how countries or states interact with each other. Think of treaties about trade or climate change between South Africa and, say, Angola. On the other side, you have national law. This is the law that applies right here, inside South Africa. It's sometimes called positive law, and it's what governs our daily lives. Now listen up, because this next one is absolutely crucial, especially for exams. It's the difference between substantive and procedural law. The easiest way to remember this is what versus how. Substantive law tells you what the rules are. It defines your rights and says things like theft is illegal. Simple. Procedural law, on the other hand, tells you how those rules get enforced. It's the process. So if someone steals from you, it lays out exactly how the police investigate, how an arrest is made, and how the court trial is run. You really can't have one without the other. And that how part, procedural law, it actually breaks down into three key areas. First, you have criminal procedure, which sets out all the rules for prosecuting crimes. Murder, theft, assault. Then there's civil procedure, which is the process for when you sue someone to enforce your rights, like if someone breaks a contract with you. And finally, you have the law of evidence, which is kind of the rulebook for both, telling you exactly how you're allowed to prove facts in any court case. So we've drawn our first major borders. Now, let's zoom in and explore one of the giant continents on our map, public law. This is the whole area of law that deals with the state itself, the government, and its relationship with all of us as citizens. It's really all about power and making sure that power isn't abused. And within this continent of public law, you've got three main countries. First is constitutional law, which is basically the state's blueprint. Then you have administrative law, which acts like a watchdog, making sure government departments and officials use their power fairly. And then there's criminal law, which is where the state decides which actions are so harmful to society that they're considered crimes against the state itself. And right at the very heart of constitutional law is this brilliant idea, the separation of powers. It's broken down into 3 branches to keep things in check. First, you have the legislature, which is Parliament. Their job is to make the laws. Then you have the executive. That's the president and the cabinet. Their job is to put those laws into action and run the country. And finally, you have the judiciary, our courts, who interpret and apply the law. This separation is super important to make sure no single part of government gets too powerful.
All right, let's cross the ocean on our map to the other major continent, private law. Now, if public law was all about the relationship between the state and the citizen, a vertical relationship, private law is all about the relationships between citizens themselves. It's horizontal. It governs our everyday interactions with each other and with companies.
And just like public law, private law has its own distinct regions. You've got the law of persons, which basically answers the question, what is a person in the eyes of the law? Then you have family law, which deals with all the legal stuff in family life, marriage, divorce, custody. And then we get to the really big one, the law of patrimony, which covers a person's entire financial universe, everything you own and everything you owe. So now we're going to zoom in even further. The law of patrimony is so massive and affects us so directly that it gets its own special section. Your patrimony is just a fancy legal word for your estate, the total sum of all your assets, like your house and your money, and all your liabilities, like your debts. This is the law of your financial life.
So what do we find in this world? Well, first, there's property law, your rights over things. Then the law of succession, which is all about what happens to your stuff when you die. If you have a will, that's called testate succession. If you don't, it's intestate succession. Then there's the giant law of obligations. This is about the legal ties that bind people, usually because of a contract or a wrongful act called a delict. And finally, you have intellectual property law, which protects your rights to your own ideas and creations. Okay, this is another one of those distinctions you have to get right. Where do these legal obligations come from? Well, a contract is based on an agreement. You and another person willingly create rights and duties. It's a lawful act. A delict is the total opposite. There is no agreement. It's a wrongful, unlawful act that causes someone harm. The classic example, someone carelessly crashes into your car. That's a delict. You didn't agree to it, but their wrongful act created a legal obligation for them to pay for your damages. And this brings us to another super important comparison that trips a lot of people up, delict versus crime. A delict is a private law issue. The main goal is to compensate the victim. You sue the person who crashed into your car to get money to fix it. A criminal offense, on the other hand, is a public law issue. Here, the goal is to punish the offender. The state prosecutes them to protect society. And here's the kicker. One single act can be both. If a drunk driver hits a pedestrian, they've committed a crime, and the state will prosecute them. But they've also committed a delict, and the injured pedestrian can sue them for medical bills. Make sense? We're in the home stretch. We've mapped out the main continents of public and private law. Now, for our final section, we're just going to fill in some of the surrounding islands and the connecting trade routes. These are more specialized fields that often mix and match different areas of law. Okay, let's just run through these quickly. Commercial law is basically a blend of private law, like contracts, and public law, like tax, all focused on business. Private international law sounds tricky, but it just answers one simple question. If a South African buys something online from a German company and it breaks, which country's law do we use? Then we have the more academic stuff. Legal philosophy asks those big, deep questions like, what even is law? Comparative law involves studying other countries' legal systems to see if we can learn from them. And finally, legal history is vital for understanding our common law because it shows us where our rules actually came from. And exhale. There you have it. We've gone from the biggest rule of all, the Constitution, through the huge divides of public and private law, all the way down to the nitty-gritty of contracts, crimes, and property. What might have seemed like a totally tangled mess at the start now has structure, right? It's still a massive landscape for sure, but it is logical, it is ordered, and with a map like this, it's completely navigable. So, we've given you the complete map, a bird's-eye view of the entire South African legal system. The framework is there for you to use, to study with, and ultimately, to master. So the only question I have for you now is, which one of these fascinating paths are you going to explore first?